Hello. This is going to be a proper discussion about what I call returning to zero. I've covered some basics in another two videos, 33 and not a day over 15, and my second bloody sleeve blog. In order to cover this concept, I need to start with the idea of what value is. So this is going to be a series of videos. The concept of value is not one which is necessarily obvious. When one asks what the value of something is, it is impossible to know exactly what that person is referring to directly. An example of this would be, what is the value of human life? Maybe, what is the value of a dollar? Or, how valuable is my child or possessions? Value is a very fickle concept. Why is this? I sum up this difficulty by stating this. Value is the very concept of relativity. A couple definitions are in order. Value is defined as the regard that something is held to deserve, a person's principles or standards of behavior, one's judgment of importance, the estimate of monetary worth, and another is to hold something in high esteem. This last one, of course, is to simply state that something is of worth, that is, something is of value. That last definition notwithstanding, you see one common thread among these definitions: a perception, a relationship to a monetary unit, an opinion. The common thread is the very presence of a scale. You see, value is the fact of a relative scale. I ask you, what is the value of a dollar? Well, you can't answer this question. You may interject, yes, I can. The value of a dollar is whatever someone is willing to trade me for it. But I didn't ask you how much of something is a dollar worth. I asked what the value was. In economics, it's far easier to conceptualize this, since we're dealing with monetary units. These units are in fact self-contained scales themselves. They are themselves stores of value. It's very easy to conceptualize value in dollar terms. But when we get away from economics, the issue is far less clear. Speaking more broadly, we can ask, what's important? What has meaning? What's the point of it all? All these big questions can really be summed up by asking, what is value itself? This is a hard question. It may seem simple and maybe even malformed. After all, I already stated value is the concept of relativity. But if this necessarily makes impossible any inquiry into what value itself is, we must then disregard all the former questions about the meaning of life. It's not so obvious. So we must answer the question about what value is in order to even begin to ask what the meaning of life holds for each one of us. We can't use the dollar to define the meaning of life, can we? We can't use such crude ideas of monetary units to assess the value of one's lived experience or even the value of a human life, maybe even your own. How valuable are you as a person, a human? This is a very fundamental question. We've been asking this question for centuries. Religion has an answer, and it can be considered a valid answer. The believer suggests that a God is necessary to define the value of human life. I know from my own background, the Christian posits that God counts every hair on your head and considers each person of infinite worth. We are in fact made in His own image and likeness. Now, what are they really driving at? How is the question of human value answered by a Christian believer? They say we're valued on an arbitrary scale created by that creator. Just as one may say a dollar's value is relative to a consumer product like a loaf of bread or a basket of internationally traded currencies. Those are both discrete scales which we can compare the dollar to in order to determine its value. But this does not answer the question in any ultimate sense. We're not stating, indeed, we can't state the ultimate value of a dollar bill. In the same way, even using a God reference, we still can't define the human worth in any ultimate sense. So my assertion that value is the very concept of relativity stands so far. Here's the problem. We want to state the ultimate value, the universal value of a thing. For some reason, we feel we're entitled to be able to state the value of this is that, but we can't. We always, always, always must use some kind of scale at the end of the day. What's the value of human life? Well, what scale do you choose? State your scale, and I can tell you the value. To state the question more accurately, we can only ask, what is the relative value, in this case, of a human life, to something else? You may be thinking, oh, but this is such a crude and crass way to define the infinite value of human life. Is it, though? I think this is the real problem. We hold ourselves in such high esteem, we don't want to admit that human life can't possibly be limited. Human life isn't of infinite worth. How can I say this? Because if we assume for a second, just bear with me, that the very concept of value is relativity, to state something has infinite worth is preposterous. This can be more clear if we consider something else that is relative. Consider a dollar bill. We can all agree that this is not of infinite worth in the sense we might consider human life to be of infinite worth. We can also much more easily recognize that to value a dollar bill, we must compare it to something else. It does not have worth in any ultimate universal sense. So this is a good candidate for consideration. So we can clearly state that a dollar's value is relative. What if I decide that my crisp dollar bill is of infinite worth? Does my opinion make it so? Of course not. What if I decide that human life is of infinite worth? Does my opinion make it so? Again, no. Continuing with the comparison, what if I decide the dollar is of no worth or value at all? Does my opinion make it so? No. Does one's opinion determine the intrinsic value of anything whatsoever? No. No, it does not. So how can we determine the ultimate value of anything? Exactly! How indeed. Fact is, all these are malformed ideas. Nothing has ultimate value. Let that sink in for a second. Consider this and accept it, just for a thought experiment. Accept that nothing has ultimate value. Does this diminish its real value? No. See, that is what we're left with when we stop assuming human life has ultimate value. If I were to say in public, as I'm doing now, that human life has no ultimate value, on the surface, it sounds very much as if I'm diminishing the value of human life. In fact, I'm pointing out that it is a category fallacy to state anything has ultimate universal value. It is as if I were to argue that blue is true, that sweet is hard, or that a piece of bark is wet. These identifiers don't match up with what I'm describing. Sweet is a taste, and tastes don't have hardness. Blue is a color, and is not a logic argument. Bark is a solid, not a liquid. In the same way, nothing can have an ultimate universal value. It must be confined on a scale to assess any kind of value judgment. If I were to state sweet is hard, and you were to inform me that this statement makes no sense, does that diminish what sweet is? If bark can't be wet, does that diminish the characteristics that it does contain? Of course not. In the same way, to state that human life has no universal ultimate value does not diminish its characteristics in any way. To state human life has no ultimate value, I'm simply pointing out that this concept makes as much sense as hard sweet. We have tried to define human value. Slavery, women, children, peasants, employees. Humans are constantly defining the value of human life relative to some external factor. But we can't define humans in this way in the ultimate sense. We all want to feel that we're infinitely valuable. But this isn't true. It makes no sense, in fact. Again, the concept of value is the very concept of relativity. It would be like saying x equals. You would ask, well, x equals what? And then I was to insist that, no, x equals. That's it. That makes as much sense to state the ultimate value of anything. Does this fact diminish the characteristics of x? Of course not. It simply makes no sense to state that something equals an ultimate. So we must always ask what the relative value is. Ultimate value is a nonsensical statement. In summary, I say it like this. There is no value in a vacuum. To state a value is to state a comparison, and it is vital to understand that. Disregarding ultimate value does not in any way diminish anything about anything. All it does is set the record straight. Returning to the religious perspective, if we recognize that the concept of ultimate value to the universe is a nonsensical idea, we can put to rest the proof for God so many people suggest. They don't realize that all they're doing is using a scale God made. It still isn't ultimate in any sense. So we start with this as a baseline. Why did I follow this question, this line of reasoning in the first place? I was thinking about why I get up in the morning. Why do I get up, go to work, even when I don't want to? What drives me? What's really important? Everything seems so pointless. What's really, really important? Ultimately, this is a matter of opinion. So we see that there is no really, really. Nothing is really, really important. We can't have the right answer. We can only have the relative answer to this question. How do I make money? I go to work. How do I feel loved and accepted? Maybe I get a wife or have a close group of friends. But what is really important in life? Money? Love? What is really important? The answer is yes. This is the starting point for this series. Remember, this is where I'm coming from when I talk about value and what matters. I hope you'll join me for the rest of the journey as I return to zero. Thanks for listening.